UK Crime Book Club. We are joining you from all over the world today, which we'll get into in a moment. First up, I'm going to ask my lovely panel to introduce themselves. So I'm going to go in the order that we're in, clockwise. So Harini, let's start with you.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much, Sam, for having me. So I'm Harini Nagendra. You'll see me. It's close to midnight for me where I am. I'm in Bangalore, India, and this is my new book, The Bangalore Detectives Club, which for some reason is the wrong way up in my screen, but I hope you can see it.
It's fine in mine.
Great. So I'm an ecologist based in Bangalore, a university professor, and I work on the history of Bangalore, and I have for many, many, many years. But this character who's set in 1920s Bangalore, young 19-year-old housewife who goes around solving mysteries and doing lots of other fun stuff, including swimming in a sari, driving her husband's beloved Ford, and solving mathematics puzzles, along with annoying her mother-in-law who thinks that women shouldn't study too much because their brains go soft. So this is Kaveri, my detective. So she actually sort of parachuted into my head one day in 2007 and said, "You have to write a book about me." I'm a little slow, so it took me a long time to get here from 2007. It took me about 13 or 14 years, but I'm here and delighted to be part of this group.
And we're delighted to have you. Heather.
Hi there. Thank you all for
I am having trouble with your sound, Heather.
Are you really? All of a sudden, huh?
All of a sudden.
This is good.
Yes, stay leaning forward.
All right. Yes, I am a pretty happy world. My book is called I write alone mystery.
I'm sorry, it's still dropping in and out at the moment. I know you've had such fun trying to get into this today.
I did have some trouble. Can you hear me better now?
Perfect.
Is that better now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm using my phone because my laptop didn't work. But anyway, I write kind of thematically dark standalones. And when I'm not doing that, I'm out hiking and biking and enjoying the beautiful Northern California scenery.
Yeah. And tell us again about The Distant Dead, because that was the part that we missed.
Oh, okay. The Distant Dead is set in the desert of Nevada, and it's about the rather gruesome murder of a middle school math teacher, and whether or not what one of his young students might or might not know about it. So that's kind of what it's about.
Thank you, Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Wang. This is my second book, which is called Imposter Syndrome. The book is really about, it asks the question, what if one of the world's most powerful female technology executives was in fact a Russian spy? And it just kind of explores that character and what happens when she gets, quite accustomed to a very nice life in the United States. I'm calling from California, and when I'm not writing, I work full time in the tech industry. And so, it's a pleasure to be here today.
So you're all very busy. You all have, things that you've done before or things that you do now. So what led you to deciding to write your debuts and then obviously move on to further novels? Harini, what started you on the path to writing? Have you always been a writer?
I've been a writer as long as I can remember reading. So I used to write these little stories at home, stories for my dad, entered, short story competitions, did a few things like that. Wrote some short stories for children, for local newspapers and things. But then once I started writing nonfiction, I write nonfiction books on ecology. And I've done a great deal of that. So once I started that, and that plus career, plus kid, plus life, sort of took over completely. So in a sense, getting back to the Bangalore Detectives Club is like getting back to a first love, because fiction really was the original passion. But I've never written anything full length before, so I think that was the hard part for me, figure out how to write an entire novel from beginning to end. And now it's a series, so I had to do now I have to do one every year. I can't do one every 14 years. So
yeah, maybe a little bit faster than one every 14.
yes.
But I'm sure it must get easier with each one, and we'll come back to that. So Heather, how about you?
I was a lawyer for quite a while, and then I stop being a lawyer to raise some small kids. So writing for me was also a kind of a second career. I didn't start until I was in my mid 40s. And it really was, I was trying to figure out what my next chapter would be. And the thing I had liked the most about practicing law was the brief writing and essentially telling my clients stories. And I realized that, I mean, I'm a book lover and a mystery lover, that I just wanted to see if I could pursue it as a second career. And I have to, I have to confess that it also took me a very, very long time to get that first book out. It took me almost 9 years. The bulk of it spent trying to figure out how not to write like a lawyer.
Kathy?
For me, I was working and I took like a break from work when my first child was born. And I think for me, I was very depressed actually. And I felt like I wanted to go back to school to learn how to be a writer. I just always worked for my whole career in tech. But then when I looked at like applying for programs, they actually all require like letters of recommendation from other like your writing professors and like writing samples, and I didn't have any of those items. So I just kind of gave up. And then I said, I'm going to try to write I would just go and try to write a book. And then I had like obviously some very bad like manuscripts. And then, eventually I found an agent who's also Heather's agent.
Yeah, he's great.
By cold emailing, them, which is the normal process. And then, so that was essentially my process.
We've already got some hellos and some questions. So hello to everybody who's already watching. Somebody has asked, for someone new to your books, sell us on each of them. So for somebody who hasn't read your book yet, Harini, what should they be, how can you encourage them to go and do so?
I'd say if you like to hear about feisty, spunky, badass women from a previous era, then pick mine up. But I also have to give fair warning. It's fun. It's a cozy mystery. So and it's about cooking and this time in 1920s. So that's my pitch.
And Heather, just trying to look who actually commented. So I'll see if I can find the name because I'm just getting Facebook user at the moment. But yeah.
I think people who like real character studies and the exploration of themes would like my books. I tend to spend the bulk of my writing time diving deep into my characters and giving them what I hope are plausible and maybe even understandable reasons for behaving, in some cases, very badly. And I tend to like to explore themes of family and the debts we owe our family, particularly our parents, and the history that we have inherited from our ancestors. So I like to play on that bigger canvas, even though my stories are generally set in small towns, that might, the stories themselves might appear to be kind of small, but I try to enlarge them with these grander, more universal themes. So if you like that kind of book, then definitely pick up my books.
Yeah, the realism is so important, isn't it? You don't want kind of a wishy-washy reason for any of the things happening in your books.
Right. The idea is that hopefully you might not forgive what the characters do, but you can at least understand it.
Yeah, I like that. Kathy?
I think mine is a little similar to Heather's in that I probably lead with characters. I'm, very interested in just like developing characters. I will be really honest. Like if you don't like unlikable characters, I don't think that you'll like my book. I think definitely has more like some. I guess I always want to portray like what I feel is an accurate picture of how people behave and how they really think. I think they're sometimes described as comic, but I guess I feel like in general life is quite comic or absurd. So I really try to reflect that in the characters and in the plots and scenarios that they encounter.
And the question was from Caroline Maston. Hi, Kaz. Thank you for your question. This is one I would have waited and asked maybe later on once we've got in, but we've been asked, so I'm going to ask you. Do you have a favourite character from your latest books? books. So Harini, let's come to you first.
Sure. I mean, I do actually. So there was a policeman, a Muslim policeman from the 1920s who's large, who loves eating, and who's very fascinated by this young woman, Kaveri, because she reminds him a lot of his own young daughter, who's very spunky. And he's a favorite character of mine just because he completely walked into the book. And yeah, so my book is not plotted. I have to give that as a disclaimer. It's just so the characters was first, and then the setting is very real to me because I do my research and old Bangalore, and then they figure out the plot. So there was actually this very stolid, boring young policeman who was supposed to be taking notes, and it was supposed to be a comic scene because he didn't understand what was going on with the murder and was writing down all the wrong information. But he was actually boring, so boring that Ismail, my policeman, walked in and took over and threw him out, and that's it. That was the end of the young policeman, and Ismail is now a fully fledged character. So I just love him because he's just a character who came in and took over and is such an understanding, supporting sort of. He's very bemused by Kaveri and the fact that she's up to solving all these murders and wants to know about fingerprints, and comes back and tells him about the latest scientific technology, and finds a bloody knife with fingerprints and tells him, "Yes, I told you so. I knew where to look for it." But he's also very supportive of her, so I love that. Also, I guess because I find this very magical about the writing process, that these characters come on screen and they have a life. They probably came from my head somewhere, but I can't remember pulling them out. But they come on full fledged. So
Come out full fledged, and you know the voice, and you understand them straight away, and yeah, a guiding hand by you, but a personality all of his own.
Exactly.
Heather, do you have a favourite?
I would say my favorite character from The Distant Dead is the character of Sal. Sal is an 11-year-old boy who is kind of develops a mentor-mentee, almost father-son relationship with his math teacher. And he is the one who finds his body. And as my kind of amateur sleuth, Nora, tries to delve deeper into what happened to the math teacher, she draws closer to this little boy who is extremely, he's a wounded, lonely child. His mother has died. He's living with his two uncles in kind of a very remote kind of prepster type ranch out in the middle of the desert. It's extremely isolated. He has no friends at school. He has to carry so much weight, yet he is so resilient and brave. And at first it was a challenge for me to try to write from the perspective of an 11-year-old boy. But the more I got to know him, the more he became a real person and not just kind of a stock little boy character. He became this very well-rounded, you can see who he'd be when he grows up, little kid. And I just really, really connected with him.
Kathy?
I think for me, for imposter syndrome, it'd probably be the main character, whose name is Julia Lerner, who is the Russian spy. She just gave me so much opportunity to explore. It's always fun to kind of write a slightly villainous main character because you just have so much more room to explore and play. She's kind of running a major company, yet she has to give interviews to like Good Housekeeping about her favorite dessert she likes to make at night, because that's kind of what you expect from like a female leader in America. And it was really fun to explore the inner psyche of someone who rises to power in a climate in the United States that kind of has an expectation of female leaders. And so I think she was definitely the most fun for me to write.
Just before I go to the questions that we've got coming in, I want to know, would you all flip from dark to cozy and cozy to dark? Harini, would you ever consider writing anything darker, or is that really
I
not
can't
your thing?
write dark. I cannot. So
Are you a reader of it?
Not much. Occasionally, yes, but it scares me too much. I mean, I work in ecology and conservation and climate change, and all of those are dark and dystopic enough, I think.
So you're looking for something lighter to take you out of that?
Yes.
Heather, would you write cozy?
I don't think I could actually. I think I think my I think my voice as a person in like emails and talking with my friends is pretty light, and you might think I would write a cozy if you kind of just encountered me, but I just dive right into, I get pulled by the deeper impulses of human nature. I want to understand them. I want to put them on the page. I want to look at them through the lens of character and legacy and history. And I just, it's like an irresistible pull, like a whirlpool that just kind of sucks me down to those places. With that said, I have been, I read a book that's very dark, and if it leaves me in a dark place, I don't like it. So even though my characters confront all kinds of things, revenge, betrayal, lies, murder, regret, I try to leave them in a better place at the end of the book than they were when they started, in a realistic, better place. It's never going to be tied up in a neat bow of like, oh, look, they're going to live happily ever after. But the people that you care about in the book, I think you'll see that they're standing a little taller at the end than they were at the beginning. So hopefully it's not just a grim slog.
Which must be better for you as well as the author. If you're, Harini's saying that you like to be distracted from the world by your reading. So Heather, the same for you with your writing, having that, you write it all out and you get it all out in your writing, but ending on, in a nice way, ending on a nicer. Yeah.
Don't want to lead anybody astray. I do read both, though. I do read both kind of more lighter and cozier fare, as well as the really dark stuff. So I like it all.
I do agree with you, though. I like to alternate. If I've read something really dark, I will read something completely different afterwards.
Yes.
I don't think I could read two. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think I could read two that had terrified me. There's a book that I won't name that still haunts me, and I haven't been able to read anything else by this author since because of some of the scenes, and they were one of my favourites. So people now will be guessing, and I'm not going to tell any of you if you ask me. It's not happening. But that it's a fine balance, definitely, whether you the reader or the writer. Kathy.
I think it's similar. I think it's very difficult for me to change. Like, I think for me, what's most important in writing and for myself is like the tone is really like, for me, I cannot start a book until I have the tone down. And like, I just have, I think, only one tone, to be frank. Like, if you try, like sometimes if you read a bunch of a different kind
of tone like yours, it's not a bad thing.
It's kind of, that's very sweet. But like, I feel like sometimes if you read a lot of like a certain author, like one author, you'll like start to write in their voice a little bit, but then like I'll get like a chapter in and I realize like I'm just like ripping off this author because like their voice got in my head, but I can't sustain it. Like it's, it ends up just being very tropey, or you don't have a really instinctual feeling for it. So for me, it's really hard to switch out of what I know.
Which is a really good thing. It shows that you've got a clearly defined voice, which is, that's a great thing to have as an author, that somebody could just pick up your book without knowing it was yours and go, oh, this is Kathy. That's a nice thing. Yeah. Laura Hamilton is asking one of our favourite questions. Have you ever acted out a scene to help with the writing process? Which for you, Harini, I mean, you've done a lot of research. It's set in the 1920s. So did you put anything nice out in the garden and act out a garden party or see how things would work? We've had some really interesting answers to this one. But most authors say to us, well, no, I might talk to myself while I'm writing and check the conversation, but physically acting it out, people either really like the idea or are really kind of horrified by the idea. So which side of the fence do you land on, Harini?
No, it's a lovely question. I never thought I could, and I probably will now that I have the idea. No, but what I do is when I'm struggling to write down a description of a scene, and sometimes it's an unfamiliar part of Bangalore, or a different side of the city that I'm trying to show, or different characters I don't know so well, then I will close my eyes and try and picture it. So if that's acting it out, I don't know, but I need to try and imagine the setting and imagine myself back there. And looking back at the book, because I'm now looking at a number of friends who are ecologists as well as just regular readers, and the ecologists are all saying, well, you can make out someone who knew ecology wrote the book. And I'm thinking, really? Not so much, because what my editor did, and she was a fabulous editor, went through chunks and said, look, here your bias is clearly showing. There's too much food love or there's too much nature love. Can you please cut these scenes? I have 3 scenes and I've taken 1 paragraph at the end. So to me, all I have left is those one paragraphs. But now I can see what they're saying, because I think that's where I close my eyes and I can picture, Kaveri's husband taking a walk by the lake, or Kaveri and her neighbor Uma auntie going for a walk through the cowherds lane, so you can see the cows and you can see the birds and you can see, so that part of the city coming alive. So I guess it's closing my eyes is the closest that I would come to.
I like that. I don't think anybody's ever said that in the same way before. Heather, how about you?
Well, I don't know if this counts, but I will often, I love to draw. And I've always loved to draw, even when I was a little girl. And I will sometimes illustrate a scene. I will draw the scene on I have a big pad of like white sketch paper, and I will draw what the characters look like, and I'll draw like a scene from the book, and then I'll just kind of look at it and like try to think about what's going to happen next and what just happened before. So I don't know if that quite falls, if that's quite
I
responsive to your
like that
question,
as
but I
well.
think
That's another great answer.
I think
Are you
that's
any
the
good at
closest I can.
drawing? Or would it be like mine
I'm
with stick figures?
I'm extremely untutored, but I think I'm okay. Like my people look like people. So yeah.
I'm not bad if I take my time, but I'm very impatient when it comes to it, because there's always a million other things to do. So I've not sat
Yeah.
down to try and draw for a while. I'm too frustrated too easily by sitting still. So
Right. It's very
yeah,
meditative though, just to kind of sit there with
yeah,
a pencil and just draw. Anyway.
I agree. I used to love that. I'm gonna try that again. Kathy, have you acted anything out?
I think in my first book, I definitely, try to envision it in my mind and how they would move and operate and think. I think for my second, which is imposter syndrome, I actually try to stay away from that just because it's like a Russian spy novel. I had never written like a thriller before. And I think that when you try to imagine it almost cinematically in your head, you kind of resort to using what you've seen in a movie, right? And I kind of, it's so tempting in something like this where I really try not to do that and just kind of think to myself how the character would be versus act it out. Right. So I think it depends on like the material.
Mm-hmm.
We've had we always come back to the same couple. We've had a lady called Anne who held a knife to her own throat to see what it felt like. I don't fancy trying that one. I'm very, very clumsy. I think that is it's not a good idea. And we had another author who, there's a place called Whitby in England, in Yorkshire, and he hung off the side of the pier to see what that would look like and had a fight at the end of the pier. I don't know if he actually had a fight himself. I can't remember if he said he had the fight with his son, as in like acting it out, or whether he did it himself. I'm going to have to message him and ask, because I can't remember. But so no fight scenes on a pier above the sea, thrashing around.
I do have to confess there's some opioid addiction in my novel, and I did take some Percocet to just kind of see what the big deal was, like just take a couple Percocet and see why people think it feels so good. So yeah, I guess I did that.
Now there's a new
made
answer.
me vomit though, so
yeah. That is a different answer than we've ever had before, Heather. Although I'm sure a fair few authors may have had a drink or two, or something like that, or maybe a nice coffee to, write that into a scene in a coffee shop. Who knows? Kaz wants to. I'm sure this is Kaz. What's been your favourite read of the year so far? So I'm going to change that slightly as well. So I want to know what you've read that you've enjoyed, and if you can read crime while you're writing crime, or if you have to switch it up. So, Harini, let's go back to you first. I keep putting you first. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So my favorite genres used to be romance, cozies, and fantasy. And I find it harder to read romance now. I mean, so my book was my 50th birthday gift to myself. I usually say so. As I've grown older, I find it harder to read romance, because it's like cozies. I like them. I can't read anything very especially graphic. And then the non-graphic ones, I'm struggling to find something that is then not very stuck with male female and the old traditional roles,
Yeah.
Prince Charming kind of thing. So I still love my romances if I find a good well written one, but I'm really reading cozies and I'm reading fantasy. And I know I don't find it very difficult. In fact, I read a lot of historical fiction, historical cozies, when I was writing mine, because it really helps to think of things like, so my next book is, for instance, has a lot of the suffragette movement going on in the background in India. And so it was really nice to see what people were doing with suffragette movements in the US and Europe. And I'm actually looking at letters which are exchanged. But reading a book is very different, right? It helps you imagine how women in those times might have been in terms of what were they learning, because the letters are kind of dry and factual, and we went for this meeting and we saw this and here's the minutes. So I do read a lot, and that helps me figure out how they get the setting and the smell and the sense of that 1920s world or 1800s world or whatever. So, yeah.
Heather?
I read pretty widely too, out both in and outside the mystery genre. I think just popping into my head right now when you asked me about something good I had read recently is a book called Mrs. Benson's Beetle. And it's not a mystery. It's about this woman who takes off on this crazy journey to Indonesia to find like a golden beetle. And it is one of the best things I've read in the past like 5 years. It's just charming, but also really kind of deep, and I love it. I agree that I tend to, my current book is set in the 1940s. And so I've been kind of drawn to other literature that's set in that time period. So I just read The Lincoln Highway, which is set in like the early 1950s. And then I just finished a book called Chemistry Lessons, which is set in the mid 1950s. Because I agree, it's kind of a fun way to kind of piggyback off somebody else's research for your own book.
And it might give you some ideas for research that hadn't occurred to you.
It does. Yeah.
Good. Kathy?
Two books that I have read lately that I really enjoyed. One is Notes on an Execution by Danya Kukafka. It's amazing. It's this book about a man who's on death row in America, and just how he kind of got there, and also, how he might be trying to escape it. It's just so vividly done. The writing is excellent. And we recently had an escaped convict in the US who escaped with a jailhouse worker. And when I heard about it on the news, I was like, I've experienced this before. And actually I hadn't. I had just read Danya's book, and it's just that well done. Another one is called Tell Me Everything by Erica Krauss. It is a story. She's a novelist, but it's nonfiction, and it talks about how she became a private investigator, which is what she became in real life. And she was investigating a series of rape allegations on a campus. Again, it's really well done. It was really unique and interesting. In terms of reading like crime novels, if I'm writing crime, I think for me, I actually do enjoy it, because I think that crime and thriller writers, which I'm not normally, I generally don't write in that genre. Like, they're the best at, when it's good, like they can hold your plot, like your attention to the plot so well that you are like, this is what I should aim for in terms of how much you want to engage the reader, right? It's like almost like it's an aspirational level of plotting, right? And it's there's a lot of really clever bits about it where it's a reminder to myself, because I'll be like, well, I've just gone like on a 9-page soliloquy on someone's feelings, and then I'm like, okay, I actually need to take that out, because like I see that like you cannot do this. It keeps someone. And so I always find it like a really good kind of reminder and grounding reminder in a way.
Another one of the questions that we ask occasionally is, if you could go for a drink or a meal with one of your characters, who would it be and why? And that's from Laura Hamilton. Harini, do you want to go first?
Sure. So Kaveri has she's a new bride who's moved into Bangalore. It's not her city end, and I wanted her to have a way of getting to know people. So she has this gossipy neighbor Uma auntie, who's this elderly woman in her 60s who lives just behind. So she's always hopping. There's a little tree she can climb, hike up her sari, climb up the tree, jump over into the backyard, and she's in Uma auntie's house. And Uma auntie knows everybody and makes the best coffee. And so, yeah, that's whom I would love to go and hang out with, because she knows everyone. She knows all the juicy gossip. She can tell you who's doing what, what's their background, what do their kids do, what do their family do, and who likes whom, who doesn't like whom, who's backstabbing whom, what's all the intrigue, what's the latest. So it would be Uma auntie, and I would go have coffee with her.
Yeah, I'm coming with you. That sounds brilliant. Heather?
I guess I would have to say, so Sal has two uncles that he lives with on this very remote ranch place. And Gideon is the older of the two, and he is the most reclusive. He barely leaves the property, but he does make this weird kind of outsider art out of found objects from some of the abandoned gold rush towns out there.
Mm.
And I think I would like to take him to the local bar, which is called the Whiskey Barrel, and just pour him a shot of whiskey and make him talk to me, because he doesn't engage with people very well at all. And people like that, I find kind of fascinating. I'd want to get inside his head, and even just to watch him sit there and not talk to me would be an interesting evening.
And Kathy?
I think I would choose Leo, who is kind of the male handler of Julia. He's like the handler who is in Moscow for a lot of the book. It was an interesting character for me to research. I would love to ask him more questions about his job, and so that would be my pick.
I'm almost scared to ask this. I'm coming to you first, Harini, but I am going to ask. Are any of the characters in your book based on real people? And the reason I'm scared is because there's a mother-in-law, and I don't want to get you into trouble. But are any of the characters based on anybody real, or are they an amalgamation of, bits and pieces of people?
For me, for sure, it was an amalgamation of bits and pieces of real women that I knew who did fun things. Because I mean, 1920s Bangalore, colonial Bangalore especially, was not an easy place for an Indian woman. There's always obviously the colonial setting and their expectations with Victorian prudery of what women could do, and so there was that straitjacketed view. For instance, Indian saris, women just wore a sari; they didn't have a blouse until the British came in, and then they said, okay, you have to have a blouse because you have to cover your upper body and all of that stuff. And then of course there's the patriarchy of Indian society and all of that stuff, right? But that said, there were so many strong women. My husband's aunt, who's 96 now, went swimming in a sari in the 1930s in Madras. And so did my friend's grandmother, this wonderful woman who passed away recently. She was 98. She fought and saved a park single-handedly. Single mother of 10 children, fought the government, took a case all the way to the Supreme Court and saved a local park. So amazing stories. My mother's grandmother was like a local midwife. So she would go off in the middle of the night. A strange man comes, knocks at the door, has a bullock cart. She'd go with him, deliver a baby, come back, go back to being the respected wife of a guy who was her husband was a bureaucrat in the British government. So all of these women doing these, navigating multiple expectations, but still managing to do what they wanted to. So and you'd fulfill expectations to the extent that you had to, but you'd still manage to do a bit of what you wanted to do. So I think that's those little bits that always fascinated me. Rebel women who weren't rebel as in people who did something completely outside. On the surface, they were respectable women from good families who did what society wanted them to do, but actually they were doing also what they wanted to do. So yeah, it's those bits and pieces that I put in from real life characters into my Kaveri and all the other women in the book.
Makes me want to cheer and wave my arms around.
Yes.
Heather?
None of my characters are specifically based on people in my life, but both my books are set in small towns. And I've always been fascinated by small towns and people who stay in them and people who leave them.
Yeah.
And to that extent, both my parents grew up in small towns in Iowa. And they both had very different experiences. My mom was a descendant of the family that founded the town. They were affluent. They were kind of the little aristocracy of the town. She was the homecoming queen. She really never wanted to leave it. She wanted to stay there and for the rest of her life. But then she married my dad, who had lived in another small Iowa town where they were immigrants from Canada. And his dad never had more than a fifth grade education. So he was a laborer, and they lived kind of south of the tracks and had kind of an outsider experience, and he couldn't wait to leave. So when I create characters that are set in these small towns, I draw on those two aspects of small town life, what it's like to really love it and be part of it and feel embraced and supported by your community, and what it's like to be trapped in a place where everyone assumes something about you based on where you came from and what your dad does that might make you want to run away. So to that extent, my characters are drawn from my parents' experiences.
Yeah, I really like that because it shows the detail. that you've gone into, and how important that's been to you, and how much thought you've put into it.
Well, I try to have characters in the books. Some of them are very happy in their town. My main character Nora can't wait to leave. But I think both points of view are real and valid.
Absolutely. Kathy, how about you? Any real people without getting anybody into trouble?
I think it is an amalgamation. And I mean, for me, sometimes like I'll write a character and they don't feel real, and I'll ask them until like I read more or I encounter someone else that gives me that one trait that I feel like rounds them out into a real person. I think for me, for this book, for Imposter Syndrome, it was a little bit almost like wish fulfillment or aspirationally. Like, I wish a character like this would exist because they are Russian spies, and without kind of talking about the current climate, like you would hope that even if someone is, told to believe one thing their whole life, that there's room for nuance and kind of thinking there. And so, it's in a way almost like wish fulfillment, right? You're creating a person that you wish would exist in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Karen McKinley, who is an author from Scotland, whose book, The Storytellers, I'm going to recommend to all of you. It's fantastic. Very, very different. She wants to know, do you find it difficult coming up with new original ideas for your books? She's between two ideas herself at the moment and driving herself mad. So maybe she's after a bit of advice. So, Harini.
No, I think I just try one maybe in a short outline and go and see where it goes. I mean, the reason I took 14 years to write book one was because I had three completely different plots. I started one and it went halfway through, and then didn't work, and then I stopped because it's so character driven. And the second one I tried and it went in a different direction. So no, I have a whole bunch of plot things that they could do, and I haven't found it difficult. But what I find difficult is because of the way I write, because I can't write an outline and then follow it so easily, is to find what kind of ideas will actually take me through to the end, because some just go halfway. Yeah, so I'd say whatever takes you, seems halfway through, which seems like a horribly wasteful process maybe, but
But if
to
it
me,
works for you, it works for you.
yeah. And it helped me learn my character more about my characters better, because I think even though the setting was completely different, they behaved the way they taught me more about how they think and what they would do in certain situations.
How about you, Heather?
I have a very hard time, I will say. I went to a graduate school program for creative writing, and the people I envied most were the short story writers, because those were the people who walked around with little notebooks in their hands because they had so many story ideas. They just had to like write them down so they wouldn't forget them. Whereas I had one story idea at the time. It was the only story idea I'd ever had, and I was just going to work it until it turned into a novel, which I did over the course of 9 years. And then when I got the idea for the second book, it was hard to get that idea. And then once I got it, I was like, well, I can't change my mind, because who knows if I'll ever have another idea. And I find that once I have the inspiration for a story, I can really go in deep and write it and figure out the motivation and the plot. But that moment of inspiration that gives you the story, those are rare for me. So I'm kind of dreading when I have to figure out what would be my fourth novel.
We'll pretend that's not. We won't think about that. We won't worry about that today. Kathy, how about you?
I think I frequently have I think multiple things, but then I'll write a little bit and then you realize it's just simply not enough to sustain like 300 pages or 400 pages and you just stop. I think it does seem wasteful, but if you think about it, like your first book is probably something that you've been thinking about for like 30, 40, 50 years, and you've grabbed all little bits of your life to put into that first book. And so when you have a second or third or fourth or fifth, like you almost have to, I feel like, go in these divergent directions in order to have enough new material to take out of it and place into your work. And so I'm the same way. I feel like it's so wasteful to just keep writing and then I'll just delete like 200 pages. But in the end, like stuff from that makes it into your final product. So I mean, for myself, in terms of advice too, I would just say you have to accept that it's not waste. It's just like part of the process.
I'm just reading a question from Donna. Donna, help me out. If you were to fictional killers, how would you kill your victims? If you were fictionally killed, let's just go with the second part. If you were fictionally killed, Who would you want to solve your case? That is a good question.
Oh,
So it's quite a scary question. Donna, I don't know what you're planning. Glad we live in different towns. Harini, who would you want to solve your murder? What a question.
I know it sounds pretty scary. So I would have to say Kaveri, my main character, just because she does not give up. So I hope she would not give up till she found out what it is.
Tenacious, we like it.
Yeah.
Tenacious and like you said, ballsy, badass women.
Badass women. But it's a good question. I'm not sure I can get back to sleep tonight. I did just turn 50 and it is midlife. So more than midlife for most. So I've been thinking a lot about how long one has left and what should one get out of life these days. So
You just be thankful that you live in a different country than Donna and you go to sleep. It's fine, that's it. She will be okay with me taking the mickey out of her a bit. It's fine. Heather,
Oh my
who's
God,
solving your fictional murder?
oh my God, that's such a hard question. I guess I would just hand it over to Jackson Brody, Kate Atkinson's detective, just because I really like him, and he would. I think he would leave no stone unturned, and give me the justice that I would certainly deserve, because I would absolutely have done nothing that would justify murdering me.
Yeah, Donna Martha, really. Kathy, how about you?
I guess I would want just some I guess I feel like if I'm going to be dead anyways, I would want to improve someone else's career in the thing of it. So if it's I would want some, depressive older detective who's been, sidelined, who can come back and make their career by solving my case. So at least I can brighten someone's future for future.
And there's somebody's next book idea right there. I don't know if she's commented back again. She says, I'm a pussycat, honest. We believe you, thousands wouldn't. Alex Hawley, hi Alex, has said, hi ladies, as someone who is currently editing their own work, what do you find most stressful about the writing process? So let's ask, what's good, what's not your favourite bit. Let's find out about the whole thing. So Harini.
what's very scary for me is starting the first part. And so now, since I just wrote book 2, now I have I have a sense of how to do this, because my editor wanted an outline. I was like, I can't outline. But what I did was I plunged into the outline the same way I plunged into the book. That is, I wrote 20 pages of a short book. Yeah. It was like 3 pages of the first scene, where I had the first scene very detailed, and I got. But so then it was very easy. That took me 3 weeks of thinking of how to do the 20-page short book, and then the writing was a breeze. Now, having said this, of course, I've jinked myself, and book 3 will be terrible, and this process will not work. But what was terrifying is this idea. I suddenly sat and I said, "Oh my God, my nonfiction books are all based on my own research." And then, of course, I do other people's research, but I've done this stuff, so I'm writing about the stuff that I know very well. And then I thought, I said, are you mad? Like you said, Kathy, my first book was 14 years. It was so much in my head. I did not have that problem. But book 2, I was like, you're going to create an entire story out of nothing? You have no data points to build the story on. You have no facts, no research, no graphs, no tables, no evidence. And you're just going to write this. So that was absolutely terrifying. And I had to trick myself into not thinking of that. And the rest was easy. Easier, let's say.
Heather.
I think that the most stressful thing for me has been writing on a deadline. The first book I wrote without a deadline. I wrote it while the kids were at soccer practice, and it was on my own time. The second book, I had a deadline, which I completely missed. And then I missed the second deadline. And then I missed the third deadline. So writing under that pressure, I found to be extremely, extremely stressful. I let a lot of things in my personal life go. My personal fitness and health kind of fell apart. It was really, really difficult. And now for my third book, I don't have a deadline again. And I'm weirdly finding that kind of stressful, because the deadline at least made me sit down and work every single day. Whereas now I'm kind of thinking, oh, I don't really feel very creative today. Maybe I'll go for a bike ride or go out with my friend for coffee. And so I'm having to kind of manage my own expectations and create deadlines for myself. And that's, I mean, it's less stressful than having a deadline from the publisher, but it's also stressful.
This is so interesting because I can only work to deadlines from the outside. And so the first thing I tell my editor or my agent is give me the deadline. And once I have the deadline, I write. It's like, and I
No,
cannot write
that's,
without the
yeah.
deadline.
Yeah. And I was, as a lawyer, I lived and died by deadlines. You know, briefs had to be done by a certain time and discovery had to be completed by a certain time. And I was fine. But somehow having to be creative on a deadline was just, it was terrible.
You're actually putting knots in my stomach with this deadline stuff.
Yeah.
You're making me very nervous about
I'm
deadlines.
sorry.
Kathy.
What's funny because Heather, I think you and I have the same the same editor too in the US.
Oh yeah, that's right, we do.
So yeah, I understand.
She was so nice about my deadlines, but still I felt so.
She's very nice. Yeah, I was also on a deadline for my second, and yeah, it's definitely a stress-inducing. I think for me personally, because I'm not a plotter, like I'm like a pantser or whatever, where you just kind of write whatever. What's stressful about that for me is I'll frequently have these like major holes about how A is, I have A and C, but there's no B in there. And, you're frequently told like, it'll just like come to you. You'll just be doing something else and then they'll pop into your head and you'll get the perfect solution. And it does happen like once in a while, but like sometimes it doesn't, and you're just continuing to write while knowing there's this huge like hole in your book, and like and then there's all these pages after it, and you're like, if I can't figure that out, like none of this is going to work. So I think that part is very stressful for me. Yeah, I can't plot it, right? Because then I don't feel like it works for me. But having those holes is very like agitating to me.
Oh, Donna's saying it was with his son. So this was the comments about authors acting out scenes. So Donna's saying it was. The author's called Mark Richards, and he was actually hanging off the pier, and he was fighting with his son. So they not a proper fight, they're acting it out, but
yeah.
And he's written, walking books with his son, and yeah, he tells it much better than I do. So somebody's asked who are your favourite crime writers? And then we've got a really creepy question after it. Thanks, Laura. So, favourite crime writers, Harini?
A whole bunch, very hard to say. But so Katrina
It's not
McPherson.
an easy question to answer, is it?
Yeah, no. Katrina McPherson for sure. I love the Dandy Gilbert series because it's set in Scotland around the same time between the First and Second World War, which is the period that I'm writing about. Rhys Bowen, I love all her historical fiction set in different New York and UK around this time. And there's some really good crime writing in colonial India. So there's Abhin Mukherjee, who does Calcutta. There's Sujata Masse, who's writing about Bombay. Wasim Khan, who's writing about Bombay. A lot of people who are writing about Bombay. So I just all favorites. Very hard to pick one from them.
Heather.
So I tend to like crime writers who dive deep into character. So I like Kate Atkinson. I really love Tana French. And then I recently started reading an author by the name of S.A. Cosby, who writes this very, very gritty Southern noir.
Blacktop Wasteland, that's S.A. Cosby,
yeah,
isn't it?
That's his book, Blacktop Wasteland. And I think he's fantastic. So I would definitely add him to my list. And I'm dying, waiting for his next book to come out.
I've heard lots of people saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Kathy, favorite crime writers?
Yeah, S.A. Cosby, I think he has a very strong voice, right? It's like he hits that spot. And I recently read Razorblade Tears, and I was like, wow, he manages to hit that tone and that voice.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really impressive.
He's really, really great. Terrific.
Yeah. So reading that. He's something I think for my favorite, maybe I don't read a ton. I would say Dennis Lehane. I recently reread Mystic River, and I was like, wow, this is just it's just so, and then I realized he's written, I have a bunch of his books. Keigo Higashino, he's a Japanese, I think he wrote Malice and a bunch of other, he's a big crime writer. I like Japanese crime because I think there's so much interesting repression there, and you know, when they do act out, it's like pretty bad. So has all the aspects that, you know, the food descriptions are excellent. Like, and so I tend to like that. Yeah, I think, and Kate Atkinson as well, because she's almost like a literary, like, right, like you're
Very
kind of
literary,
reading
yeah.
literary, you're reading crime. It's like it's wonderful because it's both.
Yeah.
And Harini, I have to say, I'm going to try some of the recipes as well. So there are recipes in the back of the book.
Oh,
So I will
fun.
be trying.
That's great. You have to tell me how they work.
I will do, and I'm going through a phase where I've forgotten how to cook properly, you know, along with the hot flashes and the terrible memory and the mood swings. And, you know, I'm a really fun person to be around at the moment. So maybe me in the kitchen with heat and knives might not be the best plan, but maybe they'll all go out for the day and leave me to it. So we'll see. I'll let you know how it goes, if I keep my eyebrows and all the rest of it. We'll see. We'll see how we get on. Okay, Laura's question, ladies. Speaking of death row, because obviously the book we were talking about, what would you have as your last meal? You're allowed a starter, a main, a pudding, and a drink. That's very generous, Laura. Really eke out the time that you've got. So, Harini.
I think I'd just go with drink. I mean, you're not gonna have the migraine. Again, turning 50, can't have alcohol. I find that gives me a migraine. If I'm not going to be around the next morning, I'm just going to drink all the way through.
So what are you going to drink? So you're going to have a starter, a main, and a pudding of alcohol, and a drink to go with it. So you can have 4 different types. What are you going to have?
So I'll start with a tart wine. I'll move to a sweeter wine. I'll move then to whiskey, and then I might end up with a whiskey liqueur.
Nice.
I want to drink with you.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
Heather, what are you going to have?
Oh, well, yeah, since I don't have to
What a
worry about
question.
my arteries at that point, I would be having, you know, cheeseburger, French fries loaded up with ketchup, definitely a great red wine, and bourbon is my kind of liquor of choice. So a Manhattan maybe, and then my dessert or my pudding, I guess it is, would be a New York style cheesecake with strawberry sauce on top.
That sounds good.
Kathy, how about you? Laura, I need your answer to this as well. I want to know what you'd have, Laura. So, Kathy, what would you have?
A California In-N-Out burger for my starter, for the main, or caviar actually, because that's expensive, and like I would have probably not bought it for myself. Okay, I'll change that to caviar because I buy In-N-Out all the time. I never buy caviar. So I'll have caviar. Then I'll have beef noodle soup, like Taiwanese beef noodle soup, because that's my favorite overall dish. And I've, you know, used the budget for the starter. For the pudding, I'll have chocolate fondue because like I always like, you know, to dip it or whatever. You know, and I'm not like a good drinker. Like I don't have any discerning taste. So I just think sparkling wine. I know it's really boring, but I have no.
No.
And I'm like Asian, you know, when you have troubles processing alcohol, I need to be able to maintain it throughout to the end.
Karen wants to know what's a Cali In-N-Out burger.
Oh,
So In-N-Out burger is a branch, isn't it?
It's a chain in like the West Coast, and it's in the US, and it's, you know, it's kind of one of those like popular chains here. So if you come to California, you should definitely go.
They're very, very good. And they also have milkshakes, which are to die for. Anyway.
Yeah. In-N-Out, like with, you know, $8. So
we have come to the end of our hour, ladies. And it's absolutely flown. And Laura's not given us her answer yet. So I'll be hounding you, Laura. I'll be hounding you to know what your last meal is. Thank you all so much for joining us. Would you like to give us a recap of your books again? Just so we, you know what to go out and buy. And actually, I did want to ask what you're all working on at the moment. So if you want to, you know, slot that in at the same time. Oh, hold on. We have an answer.
Yes, you do.
Laura's having a mac and cheese starter, a roast dinner with all the trimmings as her main, a whole tray of 15 for the pudding. Not sure what that is, and the drink's Irish whiskey. So
I think that too. Yes.
Roast dinner
Love all
sounds
these
nice.
whiskey drinkers.
Love a bit of mac and cheese, but the odd bit of whiskey I tend to not drink anything really strong, but another author last night had us all with Jaeger bombs. Are you all familiar with Jägermeister?
Yes, yes, yes. I don't know that I'd want that for my last beverage,
No,
but to each
definitely
his
not.
own.
Very big.
So, Harini, give us a recap and show us what we
So
can go and
here
buy.
is my book, and this is Kaveri, my sari-wearing detective. So this is the Bangalore Detectives Club, set in 1920s Bangalore, with a young woman sari-wearing, swimming, car driving detective who solves murders. And this is so the next book is coming in March next year, and it's Murder Under the Red Moon, which is at the time of an eclipse. And you'll also get to hear more about Kaveri's relationship with the fractitious, the mother-in-law, who really doesn't think she should be doing any of what she's doing. So we'll get to see if their relationship gets worse or gets better through the book. So that's the next.
I know which one sounds more fun for the reader. We shall see. I look forward to finding out. Heather.
All right. Well, once again, this is my book, The Distant Dead, and it's set in a small town in Nevada. And I'll just mention that the title, The Distant Dead, actually calls back to the very distant dead. There are elements of prehistoric humans in that kind of run throughout the book. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, that's in there also. And my the book I'm working on now is currently called New Liberty, and it's set in a little town in Iowa during World War II.
Brilliant, thank you. Kathy?
So my book is called Imposter Syndrome. Again, it's set in the Silicon Valley. I would describe it as just, okay, like if you liked The Dropout on Hulu or any shows like that, like, or Silicon Valley, the show, I would recommend, I think that the book is kind of aligned there. I am not working on anything particularly special right now. I'm working on some very like unspecial projects. So like, so I don't even feel like I could describe them. But hopefully one day they'll take shape into some kind of manuscript that'll be published. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. Oh, 15's a tray bake apparently. So, and we've had some really lovely thank yous as well. So
Thank you
to
all
of
for
the
coming.
members that have joined us and the admins. Thank you to you all, and Harini for staying up so late for us. Thank you.
This is brilliant. I loved it,
We
and I'm
really
looking forward
appreciate it.
to doing this in person someday, hopefully.
Fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
wouldn't that be
I'd love
nice?
to meet you all in person. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.